The air in first class is a rarefied blend of champagne and privilege, a silent promise of impeccable service. But for one passenger, that promise was about to be broken in the most demeaning way possible. We've all heard stories of nightmare flights, but this isn't about lost luggage or turbulence. This is the story of a senior flight attendant, Kyle Miller, who made a life-altering mistake. He judged a woman by the color of her skin and the simplicity of her clothes, refusing her the most basic service. He thought he was asserting his authority at 30,000 feet. He had no idea that within days, the very woman he scorned, Dr. Evelyn Reed, would be the one holding his career, his future, and his paycheck in the palm of her hand. Stay with us as we unfold a story of shocking disrespect and the epic, hard-hitting karma that followed. The hum of the Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engines was a comforting, monolithic drone, the sound of power and progress slicing through the stratosphere. Inside the first-class cabin of Global Horizon Airlines flight GH101 from New York to London, the atmosphere was one of curated tranquility. The lighting was soft, the scent of lavender-infused hot towels lingered in the air, and the clink of crystal against china was the cabin's gentle percussion. In seat 3A sat Dr. Evelyn Reed. To the casual observer, she might have seemed out of place. While other passengers were adorned in tailored business suits or designer casuals, Evelyn was dressed in a simple, high-quality, but unassuming black tracksuit and comfortable sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face was free of makeup. She wasn't traveling for leisure or to impress. She was traveling for efficiency, a long-haul flight being a rare opportunity for uninterrupted work and thought. The laptop on her tray table was her real office, the multi-billion-dollar empire she commanded, contained within its encrypted hard drive. But to Kyle Miller, the senior purser on this flight, Evelyn was an anomaly. He saw a black woman in a tracksuit who, in his narrow world-view, must have stumbled into the wrong cabin. Perhaps a last-minute, deeply discounted upgrade, or worse, a system error. His mind, a ledger of prejudices, had already made its calculations and found her wanting. The initial slight was almost imperceptible. As the pre-departure champagne was served, Kyle moved with a practiced, almost theatrical grace. He offered a warm, "Mr. Davison, the usual Krug A044, to the man in 2C. He leaned in conspiratorially to the couple in 4D and 4G. "The rosé is particularly delightful this evening." He moved past 3A without a glance. Evelyn, engrossed in a quarterly report, didn't notice at first. It was only when she saw the empty flute holder by her seat that she realized she'd been skipped. She dismissed it as an oversight. An hour into the flight, after the initial ascent, she decided she wanted some water. She pressed the call button. The blue light above her seat illuminated. 5 minutes passed. Kyle walked by twice, once to deliver a second glass of scotch to Mr. Davison, and once to clear a plate from another row, his eyes studiously avoiding her illuminated call light. A younger flight attendant, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes and a nervous energy, noticed. She started to walk towards Evelyn, but Kyle intercepted her with a low hiss. "I'll handle my section, Sarah. Go check on the galley." Sarah hesitated, shot an apologetic look towards Evelyn, and retreated. Evelyn pressed the button again. This time she watched Kyle. He was standing near the front, chatting with another crew member, laughing. He saw the light. He made a deliberate choice to ignore it. "Patience," Evelyn told herself. "Gather data. Don't react." This was a mantra she had learned over decades of navigating spaces that were not designed for her. Emotion was a liability. Observation was power. Finally, after nearly 15 minutes, as Kyle passed by again, Evelyn spoke, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the cabin hum. "Excuse me." Kyle stopped, his posture stiffening. He turned slowly, an expression of profound annoyance, barely veiled by a plastic smile. "Yes. I'd like a bottle of still water, please." He looked at her, then glanced at the empty space on her tray table. "I'll get to it when I'm able." He didn't say "Ma'am" or "Miss." The omission was as sharp as a slap. He then turned his back and walked away, not towards the galley to get water, but to the other side of the cabin to fluff a pillow for another passenger. The man in 3C, an older gentleman in a tweed jacket named Mr. Henderson, lowered his newspaper and peered over his spectacles, first at Kyle's retreating back and then at Evelyn. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of the blatant disrespect he had just witnessed. Evelyn felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, a cocktail of anger and weary resignation. She had faced this her entire life. The assumptions, the dismissals, the 1,000 tiny cuts of prejudice that were meant to remind her of her place. As a child in a rough part of Detroit, as a scholarship student at MIT, as the only black woman in countless boardrooms. But this was different. This wasn't a boardroom where she could counter with data and logic. This was a service environment, and the service was being deliberately, personally withheld. She took a slow, deep breath, her gaze steely. Kyle Miller had no idea who he was dealing with. He thought she was just an invisible passenger. He was about to learn, in the most permanent way imaginable, just how wrong he was. The flight had 7 more hours to go, and Evelyn Reed was a very, very patient woman. The initial refusal of water was not an isolated incident. It was the opening salvo in what Evelyn quickly identified as a sustained campaign of passive-aggressive neglect. Kyle Miller had made his judgment, and he was now intent on reinforcing it, using the small fiefdom of the first-class cabin as his stage. When the meal service began, Sarah, the junior attendant, approached Evelyn with the menu, her smile warm but her eyes shadowed with anxiety. "Dr. Reed, may I take your selection for dinner?" Evelyn appreciated the use of her title, a small courtesy that felt like an act of rebellion in the current climate. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll have the seared halibut, please." "An excellent choice," Sarah said, making a note on her tablet. Moments later, Kyle appeared at Sarah's elbow. "I'm handling this row," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. He took the tablet from her hand, not looking at Evelyn. "The halibut is finished. We only have the beef or the pasta left." He said it flatly, a statement of fact that was clearly a lie. The passenger in 4D, who ordered after her, was served the halibut 20 minutes later. Evelyn didn't argue. Arguing would create a scene, and she had nothing to prove to Kyle Miller. Instead, she simply said, "The pasta will be fine." "Fine," he echoed, as if the word itself were an inconvenience. When the meal arrived, it was practically dropped on her tray table. The bread roll was cold, and there was no butter. Every other passenger had a small dish of whipped butter. It was a petty, almost childish omission, but its message was crystal clear. You are less. You are not deserving. Evelyn ate her meal in silence, her mind a whirring engine of calculation. She wasn't just experiencing the poor service. She was analyzing it as a systemic failure. The purser set the tone. His blatant prejudice was a virus infecting the service standard of a multi-million-dollar aircraft. He was a liability, a walking, talking embodiment of brand risk. Throughout the flight, the pattern continued. Her requests for a coffee refill were ignored until the pot was cold. When she asked for a blanket, Kyle told her they were all in use, despite a visible stack in an overhead compartment. It was Sarah who, 5 minutes later, discreetly brought her a blanket and a pillow, whispering, "I'm so sorry about this." "It's not your fault, Sarah," Evelyn replied, her voice soft but firm. "But I do appreciate your kindness. What's your last name?" "It's Jensen, ma'am. Sarah Jensen." "Thank you, Sarah Jensen," Evelyn said, making a mental note of the name. Integrity in the face of pressure was a rare and valuable commodity. Meanwhile, Evelyn watched Kyle's performance with other passengers. With Mr. Davison, the white, silver-haired executive in 2C, he was a different person. He laughed at his jokes, topped up his scotch without being asked, and spoke at length about the best tailors on Savile Row. He was obsequious, fawning, desperate to be seen as an equal in this world of wealth he could only serve. His behavior wasn't just about racism. It was about a deep-seated insecurity, a need to punch down to feel like he was standing taller. He was less overtly hostile to other passengers of color, but the microaggressions were there. A curt nod to the Japanese businessman, a slightly slower response to the Indian family in the back of the cabin. But his contempt for Evelyn was special. It was personal. He seemed offended by her very presence in his sanctum. As the flight began its descent into London, Kyle made his final, most arrogant move. While collecting service items, he paused by Evelyn's seat. "I trust you enjoyed your flight," he said, the words dripping with a sarcasm so thick it was almost tangible. "It was illuminating," Evelyn replied, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, she let him see a flicker of the steel behind her calm facade. He wasn't expecting the direct eye contact. It flustered him for a second, but his arrogance quickly recovered. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, for future reference, premium economy is very comfortable on our airline, and it's much more affordable." It was the ultimate insult. He was telling her she didn't belong here, that her presence was a financial anomaly he had graciously tolerated. Evelyn didn't respond. She simply held his gaze. In that moment, the entire dynamic of the universe seemed to shift. For an instant, the smug smirk on Kyle's face wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He saw something in her eyes, not anger, not humiliation, but a cold, clear, calculating power that unsettled him to his core. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, as if a shadow had just passed over his son. He quickly straightened up, breaking eye contact. "Enjoy London," he mumbled, before turning and bustling away, eager to escape the unnerving stillness of the woman in seat 3A. As the plane touched down on the tarmac at Heathrow, Evelyn Reed closed her laptop. The report she was supposed to be working on lay forgotten. Instead, she had spent the last 3 hours composing a different document on her secure server. It wasn't a customer complaint. It was a preliminary action plan. The subject line read, "Project Phoenix, Phase 1, Cultural Rot Assessment, GHO101. Kyle Miller thought he had won. He thought he had put her in her place. The truth was, he had just set his own world on fire. 2 days later, the scene was a world away from the recycled air and confined spaces of Flight GH101. Evelyn stood in the penthouse suite of the Shard, looking out over the sprawling, glittering expanse of London. The city lights below looked like a diamond-dusted carpet, a kingdom at her feet. She was no longer in a simple tracksuit. She was wearing a bespoke Roland Mouret gown in a deep sapphire blue, a color that radiated power and authority. A simple but elegant diamond necklace graced her collarbone. This was Dr. Evelyn Reed in her natural habitat. She was not alone. With her were her inner circle, Liam, her sharp-witted chief of staff, Marcus, her grizzled, no-nonsense chief financial officer, and Anya, her brilliant head of mergers and acquisitions. They were the architects of her empire, Aura Innovations, a technology and investment firm that had become famous for acquiring struggling legacy companies and transforming them into sleek, profitable 21st-century powerhouses. Their current target was Global Horizon Airlines. On a large touchscreen monitor, a complex series of charts and financial projections glowed. The airline, once a titan of the skies, was bleeding money. Its fleet was aging, its technology was outdated, and its stock price had been in a nosedive for 18 months. The current CEO, Richard Sterling, was a relic of a bygone era, a man who thought brand loyalty could be sustained by nostalgia and stale peanuts. The final tranches of shares were secured at 040 GMT, Anya reported, her voice crisp. As of this moment, Aura Innovations holds 58.7% of Global Horizon's voting stock. We have controlling interest. The Predators Gala, as you called it, is over. We own them. Marcus grunted, a sound of grim satisfaction. Sterling is going to have a coronary when he gets the official notice tomorrow morning. He's been trying to secure a bailout from the Emirati fund for weeks. He never saw us coming. He saw us as a tech firm, not a serious aviation player, Liam added, handing Evelyn a tablet. He underestimated you, Evelyn. Everyone always does. Evelyn took the tablet but continued to stare out at the city. Good, she said, her voice a low hum. Let them. It gives us the advantage. Her trip to London wasn't just for this final push. It was meant to be a quiet, incognito fact-finding mission. She believed in touching the product, in experiencing the company from the customer's perspective before she remade it in her image. She had booked flights on 3 different Global Horizon routes under her non-published personal name, specifically avoiding any of the VIP services her status would normally afford her. She wanted to see the company raw, unfiltered, as any regular passenger would. Flight GH101 was her first, and what she had experienced had been more than just bad service. It was a symptom of a deep-seated disease. Liam, she said, turning from the window, I want you to pull the entire employee file and service record for a senior purser. Name is Kyle Miller, based out of JFK. Liam's eyebrows shot up. It was unusual for Evelyn to take an interest in a single employee, especially at this level. Is there a problem? He's the poster child for our cultural rot problem, Evelyn stated, her voice devoid of emotion. He's arrogant, bigoted, and feels utterly untouchable. He believes his uniform gives him dominion over others. Men like him are a cancer in a customer-facing organization. They don't just alienate one passenger, they poison the entire well. They create a work environment where good employees like the young woman who tried to help me are too intimidated to do the right thing. She recounted the events of the flight, not with anger, but with the cool, detached precision of a surgeon diagnosing a malignancy. She detailed every slight, every microaggression, every deliberate act of disrespect. Her team listened in stunned silence. He told you to fly premium economy, Marcus finally sputtered, his face flushing with anger. The audacity. It was more than audacity, Evelyn corrected him. It was a gift. He gave us a perfect, undeniable case study for the exact problem we are here to solve. Richard Sterling is focused on fuel costs and landing fees. He's oblivious to the fact that his company is being destroyed from the inside out by a toxic culture of entitlement. He doesn't understand that your brand isn't the logo on the tail fin. It's the interaction between the flight attendant and the passenger in seat 3A. She looked at her team, her eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. The takeover isn't just a financial transaction anymore. It's a crusade. We are not just buying an airline. We are going to perform an exorcism. We will tear down the old culture and build a new one founded on a simple, non-negotiable principle. Respect. For the customer, for the crew, for the brand. She paused, taking a sip of water. Anya, draft the press release. Liam, schedule a town hall for all London-based cabin crew for Friday. Make it mandatory. And get me the flight roster for GH101. I want to know the name of every single person who was on that crew. She locked eyes with Liam. And find a way to ensure Mr. Miller is on the duty roster for a London layover this Friday. I want him in that room. A slow, predatory smile touched Liam's lips. Consider it done, Evelyn. He won't know what hit him. Oh, he will, Evelyn replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she turned back to the window, watching the tiny lights of planes making their final approach to Heathrow. He will know exactly what hit him, and he will understand that his paycheck, from this moment forward, bears my signature. The news broke like a thunderclap on a clear day. At 8:01 a.m. London time, a press release from Aura Innovations hit the global newswires. The headline was stark and brutal. Aura Innovations completes hostile takeover of Global Horizon Airlines. Dr. Evelyn Reed, appointed chairman. The financial world was stunned. The aviation industry was in chaos. At the Global Horizon headquarters in New York, Richard Sterling reportedly shattered a water pitcher against his office wall before being unceremoniously escorted from the building by security personnel hired by the new ownership. For the airline's tens of thousands of employees, the news was a seismic shock. Emails flew, text messages buzzed, and private employee forums exploded with speculation and fear. Who was Dr. Evelyn Reed? What did a tech company know about running an airline? Would there be mass layoffs? The official memo that landed in every employee's inbox was concise and professional. It spoke of a new era, reinvestment in core values, and a commitment to excellence. It announced a series of town hall meetings at major hubs, starting with London Heathrow, where the new chairman would personally address the staff. In a crew lounge at JFK, Kyle Miller skimmed the memo on his phone and scoffed. "Here we go," he announced to a small group of fellow flight attendants. Another corporate raider, some tech geek who thinks she can run an airline, probably never even flown commercial in her life. "They say she's a self-made billionaire," a junior attendant offered timidly. Kyle waved a dismissive hand. "Means nothing. All these self-made types are the same. They come in, slash jobs, cut benefits, and then sell the company for parts in 5 years. Just keep your head down and do your job. These suits are all talk." He was feeling particularly smug. His trip to London had been uneventful. He'd put that woman in the tracksuit in her place, and the world had kept spinning. He was the senior man, the untouchable purser. He had friends in scheduling, allies in management. He was part of the old guard, the fabric of the airline. He was safe. A few days later, a new duty roster was posted. Kyle was assigned a quick turnaround flight to London, with a mandatory 24-hour layover that coincided perfectly with the scheduled town hall. Mandatory town hall? What a joke, he grumbled to a colleague, as if I want to spend my layover listening to some corporate drone in a pantsuit. But an order was an order, and even Kyle knew better than to miss a direct, mandatory meeting with the new supreme leader. Meanwhile, Sarah Jensen received the same notification. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had been haunted by the events of flight GH101. She had filed a confidential report about Kyle's behavior through the internal ethics portal, a move she was terrified he would discover. She knew it was a long shot, that reports against senior crew members often disappeared into a black hole of HR bureaucracy. But she had to do it. Her conscience demanded it. Now, she was going to be in the same room as the woman who had been the target of Kyle's vitriol, the woman who was now their new boss. She felt a knot of dread and a tiny, flickering spark of hope. On Friday morning, a few hundred flight attendants, pilots and ground crew filed into a cavernous conference hall at the Sofitel, connected to Heathrow's Terminal 5. The mood was tense, a mixture of anxiety, resentment, and curiosity. Kyle found a seat near the back with a few of his cronies. He slouched in his chair, arms crossed, projecting an air of bored indifference. He was determined to show that he was unimpressed. Sarah, by contrast, took a seat near the front. She wanted to see, to listen, to understand what was going to happen to her job, to her airline. She nervously smoothed the creases on her uniform skirt, her palms sweating. The lights in the hall dimmed. A man in a sharp suit, Liam, Evelyn's chief of staff, walked to the podium. "Good morning, and thank you for being here. It is my distinct honor to introduce the new chairman of Global Horizon Airlines, a visionary leader, an innovator, and your new boss. Please welcome Dr. Evelyn Reed." A polite, hesitant applause rippled through the room, and then she walked out onto the stage. For most people in the room, she was an imposing figure of power, dressed in a sharp, dark grey business dress, exuding an aura of unshakable confidence. But for Kyle Miller, sitting in the back row, it was like being struck by lightning. Time seemed to slow down, the blood drained from his face, replaced by an icy dread that started in his stomach and spread through his entire body. His bored smirk evaporated, his jaw hung slack. It was her. The tracksuit was gone, the simple bun replaced by a sleek, professional hairstyle. But the face was the same. The eyes were the same. The calm, observant, powerful eyes that had unsettled him so deeply as she sat in seat 3A. The woman he had ignored, insulted, and dismissed. The woman he had advised to fly in a cheaper cabin. She was standing on the stage. She owned the company. She signed his paychecks. In that horrifying, heart-stopping moment of recognition, Kyle Miller finally understood the catastrophic scale of his mistake. He wasn't just in trouble. He was extinct. Evelyn Reed stood at the podium, her gaze sweeping across the hundreds of faces looking up at her. She could feel their fear, their skepticism. They saw her as an outsider, a corporate predator. She needed them to see her as a leader. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm and steady, amplified by the speakers throughout the hall. It was the same composed voice she had used to ask for a bottle of water just days before. "I know there is a lot of uncertainty in this room. You're wondering who I am and what's going to happen to this airline, to your jobs. So let me be clear. I did not acquire Global Horizon to strip it for parts. I acquired it because I believe in what it can be, what it must be. The undisputed global leader in air travel, renowned not just for its destinations, but for its unparalleled service and respect for every single person who steps on board our aircraft." She paused, letting the words sink in. In the back, Kyle was paralyzed. His mind was screaming. "It can't be. It's a coincidence. It's someone who looks like her." But he knew. The cold certainty in his gut was undeniable. He felt the eyes of his colleagues on him, and instinctively tried to shrink into his chair, to become invisible. "I am not a traditional airline executive," Evelyn continued. "My background is in technology and systems. I look for points of failure. I analyze weaknesses in a system and I fix them. And over the last few months, my team and I have analyzed every aspect of this company's operations. We've looked at fuel hedging strategies, maintenance schedules, and fleet acquisition plans. But financials and logistics are only part of the story. The heart of an airline, its most critical system, is the human connection between our crew and our customers." She took a step forward, her expression turning serious. "Sometimes, The best way to test a system is to experience it yourself, without any special treatment. So, a few days ago, I took a flight from New York to London. I sat in first class on one of our flagship A380s. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah Jensen in the front row felt her heart leap into her throat. She knew exactly which flight Evelyn was talking about. Her hands clenched in her lap. I wanted to see what our premier product felt like to a regular passenger, Evelyn said, her eyes scanning the back rows, a falcon seeking its prey. And what I experienced was illuminating. She used the exact same word she had used with Kyle. It was a deliberate, surgical choice. Kyle felt a hot flush of panic. This wasn't happening. This had to be a nightmare. I saw a tale of 2 airlines on that single flight, Evelyn narrated, her voice painting a vivid picture for the audience. I saw one flight attendant, a junior crew member, who was kind, attentive, and embodied the very spirit of hospitality we should all aspire to. She tried to do her job with grace and professionalism, even under difficult circumstances. Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck, a mixture of relief and terror. And then, Evelyn's voice dropped, becoming colder, harder. I saw the other side. I experienced an airline where a senior purser, a man entrusted with leadership and setting an example, made a judgment about a passenger based on their appearance. I saw a man who would deliberately and repeatedly ignore a call light, a man who would lie about meal availability to one passenger while fawning over another, a man who would deny basic amenities like a blanket and then have the unmitigated gall to suggest that a paying first-class passenger might be more comfortable in a cheaper section of the plane. The hall was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every person in that room understood that this wasn't a hypothetical story. This was a specific indictment. This happened. Kyle's heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes trying to find the subject of the story. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He wanted to run, to bolt from the room, but his legs felt like they were cast in lead. This behavior, Evelyn's voice boomed, filled with an icy authority, is not just rude. It is not just poor service. It is a cancer. It is a poison that rots a company from the inside out. It destroys our brand, demoralizes our best employees, and tells our customers that the respect they receive is conditional. Let me be clear, on my airline, respect is never conditional. It is the very foundation upon which we will rebuild this company. She let that statement hang in the air, a verdict and a promise. Her eyes, which had been scanning the crowd, finally found him. Across the vast hall, her gaze locked onto Kyle Miller's. There was no ambiguity, no hiding. He was seen. He was known. To rebuild, Evelyn said, her eyes still boring into his. We must first remove the rot. We must hold people accountable for their actions. It is time for a new standard of professionalism at Global Horizon. She paused, then turned to her chief of staff, who was standing at the side of the stage. Liam, please bring me the crew roster for flight GH101 from JFK to LHR this past Tuesday. The reckoning had arrived. Liam walked to the center of the stage and handed Evelyn a tablet. The entire room held its collective breath. Kyle Miller felt the world tilt on its axis. He was no longer a man in a crowd. He was a specimen under a microscope. Evelyn glanced at the screen. "The senior purser on that flight," she announced, her voice resonating with cold finality, "was Mr. Kyle Miller." She looked up from the tablet, her eyes once again finding his in the back of the hall. "Mr. Miller, would you please come up to the stage?" It wasn't a request. It was a command, a death sentence delivered in a calm, corporate tone. Every head in the room swiveled to find him. The sea of faces parted, leaving him exposed and utterly alone. His colleagues, the ones he had laughed with just an hour before, now stared at him with a mixture of shock, pity, and dawning comprehension. For a moment, he remained frozen, his mind refusing to accept the reality of the situation. Then, propelled by a force he couldn't control, his legs began to move. Each step down the aisle felt like a mile. The walk from the back of the conference hall to the stage was the longest, most humiliating journey of his life. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own frantic heartbeat in his ears. He climbed the few steps to the stage, his face pale and clammy. He stood before Evelyn Reed, the woman in the tracksuit, now a towering figure of judgment. He couldn't meet her eyes, staring instead at the floor. "Mr. Miller," Evelyn began, her tone dangerously soft. "I believe in giving everyone a chance to explain themselves. Please tell me and tell all of your colleagues here today about the standard of service you provided in the first-class cabin on flight GH-Masmohot." Kyle opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat was dry, his tongue felt thick and useless. He swallowed hard. I don't recall any issues," he finally stammered, the lie sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "You don't recall?" Evelyn's eyebrow arched. "Let me refresh your memory. Do you recall refusing a passenger's request for water for nearly 15 minutes? "I was very busy. The cabin was full," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "The cabin was not full, Mr. Miller. There were 3 empty seats, and you were not busy. I watched you chatting with your colleagues. Do you recall telling that same passenger the halibut was unavailable, only to serve it to another passenger moments later?" "A mistake? In the galley?" "There was no mistake," Evelyn cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "There was a choice. You made a choice to treat a passenger with contempt. And finally, do you recall suggesting she might be more comfortable in a different, cheaper cabin?" Kyle's eyes darted around frantically, looking for an escape that didn't exist. He looked out at the sea of faces, his former kingdom, now his jewelry. He was drowning. "It was a misunderstanding, a poor attempt at a joke. I assure you," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "I was not laughing." She turned her attention slightly. "I'd also like to invite another crew member from that flight to the stage. Sarah Jensen, could you please join us?" Sarah, looking terrified but resolute, stood up from the front row and walked to the stage. She stood a few feet away from Kyle, pointedly not looking at him. "Miss Jensen," Evelyn said, her tone softening considerably. "You were on that flight. Did you witness Mr. Miller's behavior towards me?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment. She could lie to protect a colleague or tell the truth to uphold her own integrity. She chose the truth. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Yes, I did. I tried to serve Dr. Reed myself, but Mr. Miller told me to leave it to him. I saw him ignore the call light. I heard him lie about the meal choice. I filed a formal report about it yesterday morning because I knew it was wrong." A gasp went through the audience. She had reported him before any of this had come to light. Her credibility was ironclad. Evelyn gave Sarah a nod of profound respect. "Thank you, Miss Jensen. That took courage. You may return to your seat." As Sarah walked off the stage, Evelyn turned her full, undivided attention back to the quivering man before her. "So, we have my own first-hand experience, and we have the corroborating testimony of a brave colleague, Ms. Jensen. I should also add that another passenger from that flight, a Mr. Arthur Henderson, was so appalled by your conduct that he took the time to write a detailed letter to the CEO's office. That letter arrived on my desk this morning. She had him, pinned from every conceivable angle. There was no denial, no excuse, no escape. "Mr. Miller," Evelyn said, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, "you represent everything I am going to change about this company. The arrogance, the prejudice, the belief that you are above reproach. You failed in your duty as a crew member. You failed in your duty as a leader. And you failed in your duty as a decent human being." She took a step closer, and for the first time, Kyle was forced to look up and meet her eyes. He saw no anger. He saw no malice. He saw something far worse: indifference. The cold, dismissive indifference of a superior being swatting away a fly. "You made an assumption," she said, "that the person whose comfort you neglected was powerless. You were wrong. You work for me. You are paid by me. Every paycheck you have ever received from this airline is, ultimately, funded by the passengers you serve and the shareholders who own it. And as of this week, that means me. Your paycheck has my signature on it." She paused, letting the full weight of her next words land with the force of a physical blow. Or rather, it did. "As of this moment, Kyle Miller, your employment with Global Horizon Airlines is terminated, effective immediately. Your credentials will be revoked, and security will escort you from the premises. Let this be a message to everyone here today. This is the new Global Horizon. In this company, dignity and respect are not optional. They are the cost of entry. We will not tolerate bigotry in any form. Not in the cockpit, not in the corporate office, and certainly not in our cabins. This is day one." With a flick of her wrist, she dismissed him. Two large security guards, who had been waiting discreetly by the exit, began their walk towards the stage. Kyle Miller stood there for a beat, his world utterly and completely shattered. The career he had built over 2 decades was gone. The pride he had taken in his uniform was gone. The smug superiority that had been his shield was gone. He was nothing, a publicly humiliated, unemployed man who had made the single biggest miscalculation of his life. And it was all because he had refused to get a bottle of water for the woman who now owned his sky. The silence that followed Kyle Miller's exit was a physical entity, a thick, heavy blanket that smothered the cavernous conference hall. 200 employees sat motionless, their minds collectively replaying the brutal, surgical precision of the preceding 10 minutes. They had walked in that morning expecting a dry, corporate presentation, perhaps some empty platitudes about synergy and the future. Instead, they had witnessed a public execution, the swift, merciless end of a 2-decade career and the fiery birth of a new corporate philosophy. The legend of Flight GH-101 wasn't just born, it was forged in the stunned silence of that room, an indelible cautionary tale that would be passed down through generations of crew. On stage, Dr. Evelyn Reed let the silence linger for a calculated moment, allowing the full gravity of her actions to settle. She saw the fear in their eyes, but she also saw flickers of something else. Dawning respect, and for many who had suffered under the petty tyrannies of colleagues like Kyle, a profound sense of relief. She stepped back to the podium, her demeanor shifting from that of a stern judge to a constructive leader. "I want to be perfectly clear with every one of you," she began, her voice resonating with a newfound warmth, calming the turbulent emotions in the room. What you just witnessed was not the beginning of a witch hunt. This was not about making an example of one man for the sake of fear. This was about drawing a line in the sand. The old way of doing things, of valuing seniority over integrity, of tolerating prejudice as a personality quirk, of allowing a toxic culture to fester in the name of how things have always been done. That way is over. She looked out at them, making eye contact with as many as she could. The vast majority of you are dedicated, professional, and kind. You are the heart of this airline, and you have been let down by a system that failed to support you and a culture that, in some corners, had turned sour. My promise to you is this: from this day forward, we will build a culture of support, respect, and empowerment. Your hard work will be recognized, your integrity will be rewarded, and your voices will be heard. This was the pivot. It was the moment she turned an act of termination into an act of creation. The fear in the room began to recede, replaced by a cautious, fragile flicker of hope. In the days that followed, Evelyn's words proved to be more than just rhetoric. Her first official act was to summon Sarah Jensen to the newly acquired corporate offices in London. Sarah walked through the gleaming lobby, feeling a level of imposter syndrome she had never imagined, expecting a formal debriefing. Instead, Evelyn greeted her not in a boardroom, but in a comfortable office with a view of the city, and offered her a cup of coffee. "Sarah," Evelyn began, her tone warm and direct, "in my world, I analyze systems for points of failure and points of strength. On that flight, Kyle Miller was a critical point of failure. You, on the other hand, were a critical point of strength. You faced pressure from a senior colleague. You knew his behavior was wrong, and you chose to act with kindness and integrity. You tried to help me, not knowing who I was, but simply because it was the right thing to do. That is an invaluable asset." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "I am creating a new role, effective immediately, in-flight service standards and training manager. It will be your responsibility to help me build our new training curriculum from the ground up. I don't want another corporate drone reading from a binder. I want someone who understands the pressures of the cabin, who has seen the best and the worst of our service, and who has the moral compass to guide us. I want you." Sarah was speechless, a whirlwind of shock and gratitude rendering her momentarily mute. She had spent years feeling like a powerless cog in a vast machine, and now the most powerful woman in the company was telling her she was the solution. She finally found her voice, accepting the position with a tremor of emotion. Her first project was to spearhead the development of the Horizon Standard, a revolutionary training program. It included rigorous situational training based on real-life passenger complaints and crew feedback, workshops on unconscious bias led by top D&I consultants, and a new mentorship program pairing junior crew with proven leaders judged on their empathy, not just their seniority. While Sarah was building the future, Kyle Miller was crashing into his past. The news of his public humiliation spread through the tight-knit aviation community like a wildfire. He called a contact at a rival transatlantic carrier, a man he'd shared drinks with for years. The voice on the other end of the line was cold, distant. "Kyle, I'm sorry, man. We saw the internal memo. Everyone saw it. My hands are tied. We can't touch you." It was the same story everywhere he turned. He was an untouchable, a pariah. His 2 decades of experience were worthless, eclipsed by a single, catastrophic failure of character. His arrogance curdled into a bitter cocktail of self-pity and rage. He refused to accept responsibility, instead blaming the woke new boss, the spineless junior attendant, the world that had conspired against him. But his anger couldn't pay his bills. Within 3 months, he was forced to sell his apartment. The man who once strode through the world's most glamorous airports with an air of unassailable authority now found himself stocking shelves at a big box retail store in a drab New Jersey suburb. The crisp tailored uniform was replaced by a cheap polyester polo shirt. His new reality was the incessant beep of the checkout scanner, the smell of floor wax, and the endless task of folding sweaters, a humiliating, monotonous loop that was the hard, grinding karma for a lifetime of unearned superiority. Meanwhile, Global Horizon Airlines was being reborn. Evelyn's investments were targeted and visible. Crew rest areas on long-haul aircraft were refurbished with ergonomic bunks and better noise insulation. Employee benefits were enhanced. Anonymous reporting systems were created that actually led to investigations and action. The positive changes rippled outwards. Customer satisfaction scores began to climb. Positive reviews flooded social media, praising the incredibly attentive and happy cabin crews. The airline's stock, once in a death spiral, began a steady, confident ascent. 6 months after that fateful town hall meeting, Evelyn Reed was once again in seat 3A on a flight to the company's newly expanded hub in Singapore. The first-class cabin was a study in understated elegance, subtly refurbished under her direction. She was reviewing quarterly reports, but this time, the numbers told a story of triumphant growth. A young flight attendant named David, his uniform immaculate and his smile genuine, approached her seat. He didn't know who she was beyond the name on his manifest, but his training from the Horizon Standard had prepared him for this moment. "Dr. Reed," he began, his voice exuding a quiet confidence. "A very warm welcome aboard. My name is David, and it will be my pleasure to take care of you on our flight to Singapore today. I see from your profile you prefer still water, so I have that ready for you. May I offer you a glass now? Or perhaps you'd prefer to start with a glass of our Bollinger Rose 8. He was proactive, respectful, and attentive to detail. He embodied the new culture. Evelyn looked up from her tablet, a genuine, unguarded smile touching her lips. She saw more than just a flight attendant. She saw the fruits of her labor, the vindication of her crusade. She saw the future. "Water would be wonderful, David. Thank you very much," she replied. As he moved off to retrieve it, she leaned back in her seat, the low hum of the engines, a familiar, comforting sound. She thought of Kyle Miller, not with anger, but with a sense of distant pity. He had been a symptom of a disease she had been destined to cure. The simple glass of water, once a symbol of disrespect and denial, was now a testament to her victory. As the plane powerfully accelerated down the runway, lifting into the vast, open sky, Evelyn knew this was more than just a flight. It was a new horizon, one she had built not just with capital and strategy, but on the enduring, non-negotiable principle of human dignity. And there you have it, the incredible story of Dr. Evelyn Reed and the flight attendant who learned the ultimate lesson in karma. It's a powerful reminder that the person you look down on today could be the person you answer to tomorrow. This wasn't just about one man's prejudice. It was about a visionary leader who understood that a company's greatest asset is its culture of respect. Evelyn Reed didn't just fire a bad employee, she fired a toxic mindset and, in doing so, saved an entire airline. If this story of poetic justice and powerful leadership resonated with you, please give this video a like. It really helps our channel grow. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of epic karma. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the most incredible true stories. We want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed an act of prejudice backfire so spectacularly? Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching.